All right. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to wait as a couple more people are still joining the webinar. If you're live on LinkedIn, we're also live on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. So thanks, everyone, for joining us. We'll get started here in just a second. Fantastic. We're still letting a couple more people come on in, and we'll get started here in just a second. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Fantastic. Well, we're going to jump right in. Thanks, everyone, for taking time out of your day to join this webinar. This webinar is really on everything around Microsoft 365 and how can your organization leverage their ecosystem to really have everything in one place. So the goal of this webinar is to kind of talk to you about how tools like Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and all the different tools, how you can combine them all to have an ecosystem to really run your business off of them. So before we dive into the content, a couple housekeeping items. First, a recording of this webinar will be available in the next 24 hours. So if you registered online, you will receive an email of this webinar. If you're joining us live on YouTube or Facebook or LinkedIn, you can watch the recording there or go over to our website and you can grab a recording there as well. Please participate in the Q&A. If you are joining us through the webinar, there's a Q&A button right in the middle of the Zoom that you can ask questions and we'll answer them as well. Also, hundreds of you submitted questions in advance of this webinar. So we're tailoring this webinar to your specific questions around how you want to utilize Microsoft 365 more. And then last but not least, if you're looking for more help with Microsoft 365, head over to our website, nwtex.com/Microsoft 365, and you can book a meeting with us to get more help around Microsoft 365. Fantastic. A couple introductions. My name is Taylor Wells. I'm the Director of Marketing with NWTex. And Northwest Technologies Group, NWTex, is really helping organizations focus on revenue generating activities, and we'll handle all your IT. So we do deal with things like Microsoft 365, but we also handle networking, cybersecurity, business phone systems, really becoming a part of our clients' team when it comes to IT and helping them take care of their IT needs so they can focus on what makes their business successful. We also have we do a monthly webinar. So if you're interested in our other webinars, head over to nwtex.com/webinars and you can see the different series we have on password managers, cybersecurity, business phone systems, and we have you can watch them all on demand there as well. Awesome. So today's agenda is going to be around a couple different items here. The first one is why the cloud. So we're going to be talking about if you're currently using on-premise servers or you have an on-premise infrastructure, why is the cloud appealing and why should you consider the cloud as an option to host your technology? Next, we're going to talk about the world of Microsoft. A lot of things have changed in Microsoft. They're changing their terminology. They're changing their licenses and plans. We'll be talking a little bit about that. We're going to dive into SharePoint and OneDrive. What are those tools? How can you utilize them for file storage and internal collaboration and external collaboration? We're going to be talking about maximizing Microsoft Teams. I'm going to do a demo later on as well of Teams, of how we utilize it, how we help our clients utilize it, what's the fit for Teams. We're using Zoom right now, so you might be wondering, why aren't we using Teams? And don't worry, we're going to get into all of that. And we'll talk to you about kind of our methodology and our thoughts around where does Teams fit and where does other tools work as well. We'll be doing, like I mentioned, a live demo of Teams and lastly, I'll have a Q&A towards the end of the webinar. Once again, thanks. We already have a bunch of great Q&A questions coming through. Please send those through and we'll make sure we'll catch all those throughout the webinar and in the Q&A section as well. So let's jump right into the content here. First, why the cloud? So here's a couple ideas for you to take away if you're evaluating whether I have an on-premise infrastructure versus having something in the cloud like Microsoft 365 or Google Workspaces. I see some questions coming in around Google Workspaces. I'll talk about that as well. And one of the things I want to cover here is kind of comparing Microsoft 365 to other cloud platforms and why we recommend Microsoft 365 for most businesses. But first, kind of evaluating the cloud. And one cloud solution is Microsoft, right? And the first point here is 80% of the Fortune 500 companies use Microsoft cloud services. So one of the big hesitations with utilizing the cloud is the security aspect. It feels more safe to have your stuff in your building versus having all your information and files on Microsoft servers or Google servers or AWS. And that may feel better and that you may have a sense that it's close to you. But honestly, from a security standpoint, Microsoft, AWS, Google, all these large providers are investing billions of dollars into ensuring their infrastructures are secure. Nothing's 100%, right? But when push comes to shove, the amount of security you can put in place in your local infrastructure versus having something in the cloud is really, it's hard to compare the two. That being said, there is great reasons to have on-premise servers or on-premise infrastructures. And a lot of our clients still have those, right? Especially if you have, you're trying to host QuickBooks Desktop on your server and you don't like QuickBooks Online, or you don't like how it functions in the cloud in a virtual server, or, you have some sort of industry specific software like a CRM or practice management software that you have to store locally. So there still is some great reasons to have your information stored locally. That being said, it's honestly the security you get, and the reason why so many Fortune 500 companies trust the cloud is you get better security, you get a more scalable, we'll talk about this a little bit as we go through the cloud as well, you get a more scalable infrastructure. It's more cost effective. You don't have, especially if you're in an office building, right? You don't have, if your internet goes down or your power goes out in that building, then your server goes down, right? And if you've ever experienced that, also things like having to use a VPN to access the server, and it's much more demanding on your infrastructure having things stored locally versus having things stored in the cloud. So specifically, we'll talk about a little bit later in our presentation around file storage. That's one thing you definitely should migrate to the cloud. There's really no good reason. I've worked for this company for 5 years, and I've never seen one time where storing files locally made more sense versus storing files in the cloud. Now, if you're using a server, like I mentioned before, for QuickBooks or some practice management software that you have to use on a local server, there's good reasons to have a server. But if you're using a server just for file storage, OneDrive, SharePoint, and there's a whole host of other file storage solutions out there that are great for storing files. And we'll talk about the benefits of file storage in the cloud later. So yeah, ultimately, kind of the big concern people have is security. And that kind of brings us to our second point, is improved security and compliance. So the improved security and compliance really is all around how can you, once again, a couple different areas here. First, the cloud, they're investing way more into security than you or your IT team will ever do, especially if you're a small to medium-sized company, right? If you're an enterprise company, you may have an IT department that can host and have a lot of security in place. If you're a small to medium-sized company, you probably don't have the security. And then number two, compliance. If you're in a regulated industry, or if you're just holding and storing a lot of sensitive data, I'm talking, PII, personal identifiable information, is kind of the industry term for sensitive data. Credit card information, full names is sensitive data, date of birth, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, social security numbers, bank account information. Any sort of sensitive data is unfortunately, extremely risky to store. And if you're storing it locally, it's harder to protect. And also, it's harder to demonstrate compliance. If you're using Microsoft 365, or if you're using a cloud storage, you can put in the policies, the procedures, the multi levels of security in place to ensure you are not only secure, but you also demonstrate compliance, right? And like I said earlier, there's only, nothing's 100%, right? So for your obligation as a business owner or a business leader, especially in a small to medium-sized company, your obligation is two things. First, to put in the best practices within reason, right? that everyone that are most common best practices. And then number two, that you can demonstrate that. So putting in those best practices, the cloud has a lot of those, and then demonstrating that, having, whether you're HIPAA or FINRA, FTC, IRS, SOC, ISO, NIST, any one of those frameworks or requirements, this cloud will be able to have a lot more of those. We'll be able to demonstrate a lot more of those, and also be able to put the security features in to make sure you have the best practices in place. Awesome. Number three, kind of why the cloud is, it helps you reduce cost. So servers, if there's anything, especially if you're a small to medium-sized company, there is nothing more complex in your environment than a server. In the hundreds of companies I've worked with and the countries we serve around the world, especially in small to medium-sized companies, servers are the most complex, the biggest bottleneck, the most costly form of technology you're going to have in place in your business. So if you can eliminate that and migrate to the cloud, that's a huge win, along with all the benefits of the cloud, which we'll talk about later as far as file storage and collaboration. But maintaining a server is just so costly. You need an engineer level of experience to maintain one. If you've ever tried to patch it or replace your server, I can't do it. I'm definitely not qualified. And so you need somebody that has a high level of technology experience to do that. So you need an IT partner or a vendor. Once again, there's still reasons to have servers. That being said, if you can reduce it, and if you can eliminate it and move everything into the cloud, you'll save a lot of money, and then ultimately just have less IT cost. And then ultimately it'll be more stable, right? Like having a central point of failure for your technology infrastructure is super, if things were to go out, you're going to lose time, your team's not going to be efficient. So ensuring you have a stable environment is super important. And this kind of goes into point number 4 here, which is the cloud helps to simplify IT management. So IT management, once again, you're going to need more IT help, more experts to help you maintain everything. And then number 5 here, the cloud promotes agility and keeps you current. So the great thing about the cloud is it's automatically being updated. If you've ever bought a server, it costs so much money to maintain one, and you have unfortunately the issues of having to replace it every 5 years, update the licenses, patch things, so on and so forth. The cloud, you definitely have your subscriptions you have to pay for, right? So if you're paying for Microsoft 365 or whatnot, or if you're paying for a virtualized server, there's some subscription cost in that. From our standpoint, it's still way more cost effective to have a server. And then the ongoing cost to keep things current and to scale, right? If you want to open up a second location, or if you want to franchise, or if you want to sell your business or merge with another business, it's so much easier to go from cloud to cloud versus on-premise to the cloud. So the picture I'm trying to paint for all of you is that, especially for a small to medium-sized business, if you can eliminate your servers, especially file storage, move that to the cloud, and even your application, that's a huge win for your organization. There's tons of benefits from a security standpoint, compliance standpoint, simplicity standpoint, and just more stable, right? Having that main point of failure is super challenging. So I want to hit one question versus cloud providers. So we're getting questions coming in around Microsoft Workspace, AWS, and the other providers. So we have clients that use Google and Microsoft. It's probably a 70% Microsoft, 30% Google. I love Google products as a personal consumer. Gmail is probably the best email solution out there, hands down. I love it. I use it for my own personal email, and it's just the best. Google gets search, and they're a search engine. So if you're searching files in Google Drive, or if you're searching emails in Gmail, they get it. They really dialed it in. That being said, Microsoft 365, from our standpoint, is just always a little bit ahead of Google when it comes to 2 important things: security and compliance. Google, workspaces, they're even just recently in the past couple of months, they've added more features when it comes to enabling more additional security features and demonstrating compliance. But their Microsoft 365 is just one step ahead. And then Microsoft Teams is just really probably one of the best collaboration platforms available. And so ultimately, using Teams, as kind of a competitor to Slack, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes, is really just so much more powerful. And you get that in the Microsoft 365 universe. So I love Google Workspaces. It works, especially if you're in a non-regulated industry. So if you're not a law firm, financial firm, CPA firm, medical organization, or you're not working with the government and government contracts, then Google can be a great fit, right? If you're a creative marketing agency, even then, we've had clients that are marketing agencies that had to pass a security data audit, right? Where they needed SOC 2. And Microsoft 365 was one of the ways they're able to do it, because they're able to demonstrate how they're managing things better and just have more security features. So it's really a case-by-case scenario. I think Microsoft, and we'll talk a little bit more about getting help later, but Microsoft 365, I'll be the first to admit, they are not the most intuitive platform. And you've probably experienced issues yourself. Google and Apple products, they're way more intuitive than Microsoft products. That being said, I'm using a Mac right now and I love iPhones, but we still use Microsoft 365 for all of our file storage and for Teams and for Outlook and all that fun stuff. So the biggest key here is ultimately that it's not the most intuitive. It takes more work to manage, but it's a better platform. It's more secure. It has more compliance capabilities. It has just more features in general. And it's a better ecosystem for all those things. So if you're evaluating moving to the cloud and you're evaluating Google or Microsoft, or maybe you're on Google and you're constantly evaluating, going back and forth, there's a lot of great reasons to go Microsoft 365. We can help you evaluate that. Like I mentioned, some of our clients still use Google and they use Google Workspaces instead of Microsoft 365. And there's good reasons for that. If you need help, reach out to us and we can definitely help you evaluate that. Awesome. Let's switch gears here. The world of Microsoft has changed. And so they're actually coming out with some new terminologies. And so they're switching from Office 365 to Microsoft 365. And as you can see here, there's so many different subscription options. They're moving from this Office 365 to this Microsoft 365. And they have a lot of different subscriptions. And if you've ever tried to go sign up for their subscriptions, they're confusing. One big point here is, first, file storage is pretty much included in all of the subscriptions, and you get like a terabyte of data per user. So for file storage, it's included in your Microsoft 365. So is Microsoft Teams. And so if you have an E3 license, it's included. So it's not an extra cost to move your files to the cloud from a subscription standpoint, because you're probably already paying for it if you're using Microsoft 365 for your Outlook account. Another thing to notice here is the subscriptions are changing. So they're changing the terminology. So you'll see over the next couple of years, they're going to be moving from Office 365 to Microsoft 365. And you will be able to, because they're including more security features. So not only is it the Microsoft Office suite, so Word, Excel, Outlook, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, etc., but they're also going to be including things around kind of endpoint management. And that means kind of adding the additional security features for your computers, because Microsoft, they have their Surfaces and their Microsoft products, their hardware, and they're trying to have their subscription be all encompassing where they can include additional features. So you'll see things down here, which are really just additional security features. We'll talk a little bit about that later. The main point here is that some of the terminology is changing. And then ultimately there's a lot of subscription options. So depending on your organizational needs, there's a subscription. Definitely reach out to your IT department or a Microsoft reseller like us, and we can help you evaluate which subscription you need. Another point here is understanding kind of the comparison of the Microsoft Premium versus the E3 licenses. I'll let you look over these real quick. These are just some of the features that are included. Like I mentioned, there's a bunch of file storage. I'm not going to dive a ton into this, but ultimately they're changing around their terminology. They're adding additional features when it comes to kind of endpoint security and things like that. Awesome. Let's switch gears and talk about SharePoint and OneDrive. So SharePoint and OneDrive, when we're talking about SharePoint, first of all, SharePoint is a very complex tool that you can do a lot of things on it. So SharePoint gives you the ability to ultimately have kind of an internal collaboration platform. So you can store documents, you can have a calendar, you can do surveys, you can have audit processes. There's a lot of different types of things you can do in SharePoint, and you can customize it and build out a lot of things. A lot of enterprise clients use it for all sorts of internal processes and internal communication. How we use it is internally, we use it for our file storage and internal collaboration. So when we're storing Word documents, Excel documents, we use it for internal collaboration, and we store all our internal documents. When it comes to OneDrive, which we'll talk about in a second, that's more for internal, that's more for external documents. So when we're collaborating with clients, we'll store our files in there. And Microsoft just recently changed, and they're expanding OneDrive for Business. So you're going to have your own personal OneDrive folders where you just have your own personal folders, but then they're also expanding business folders where you can then have kind of group folders. You can share documents with your clients and so on and so forth. But SharePoint and OneDrive, they work in synchronous in a lot of ways. And there's, depending on your organizational needs, there's different ways to use it and different functionalities to use it. But for lack of a better expression, SharePoint's really great for just internal file storage, and it can do a lot of other things as well. This is one of our partners that helps us with Microsoft 365. This is how they use it. They kind of use it for an internal dashboard and communication board for their employees. They have files, they have archives, assets, conference rooms, all sorts of things for kind of like an internal board and collaboration for file storage. So kind of moving over to OneDrive and the difference of OneDrive. And personally, I like OneDrive more than SharePoint. I think OneDrive is a more seamless tool, and I can see Microsoft kind of expanding it more and making it more full function file storage. So if you're a company that stores files, and let's say you share files with your clients a lot, first, number one, you should never email sensitive documents unless they're encrypted, or sensitive information in general. You should never put, sensitive information in the email unless it's encrypted. And even if it's encrypted, you can't guarantee your client's going to send you files that are encrypted, right? So if you're a CPA firm, a financial firm, a law firm, or if you're just sharing information, that's why banks, if you notice, most banks, they'll have a secure vault where you have to log in with a login and password to a vault. Citrix ShareFile is a great example of this. A lot of banks use Citrix ShareFile, and we have some of our clients use it, especially if they have more complex file storage needs. So that's kind of the ultimate premium file storage. If you need something kind of in the middle, or maybe you don't know, we can help you evaluate that. But OneDrive is a great in between. You're probably already paying for it, right? If you're a Microsoft 365 user, you are already paying for it. You already included terabyte of free data. It's a huge win. And here's what you can use it for. So OneDrive has some awesome features for sharing files securely with other people. Google Workspaces and Google Drive sort of has this, but OneDrive even takes it up a notch, where you can have multiple ways of sharing files securely. So when I share a file with a client, I send them a file. It requires them to log in and authenticate themselves. And that is the most important thing you should get out of all of this, is if you're ever sharing files, the most secure way is when somebody has to authenticate themselves through a login, password, and multi-factor authentication. I'm going to repeat that because that's super important. The best standard, the highest standard for sharing files with your clients, vendors, internally, is that somebody has to authenticate themselves through a login, password, and multi-factor authentication. Anything less than that, a link, an attachment, an email, encrypted email, that's all secondary. It's not as secure. And there's ways to get around it, and it's not as foolproof as a solution as some sort of login. That's why you see banks and Fortune 500 companies use this standard where they have to log in with a username, password, and multi-factor authentication. So it's kind of a two-factor authentication process where they have to log in. And OneDrive allows you to do this. So you can share an individual file and somebody has to authenticate themselves. And then you can also create a folder. The cool thing about this is if you're using encrypted email, that's great. But the problem with that is somebody might send you an email back and it may not be encrypted, or they're going to send you their tax returns back, or they're going to send you a legal document back, or they're going to send you some sort of document that's not encrypted. So it's super important that you create a culture for your clients that they know what the best way to share files with you is. Because if you don't, they're just going to email you. And as a little side note, when you send an email, it doesn't go directly to the person's other inbox. It actually goes around the world onto all sorts of different servers. And if any one of those servers get compromised, your file is exposed. So the point here is you want to create a place where people have to log in, download documents, and be able to upload documents. OneDrive has a great solution for this, where you can upload documents, download documents, create a shared folder. And the cool thing about OneDrive is you can collaborate as well. And this is probably the coolest feature about the cloud and OneDrive in general, is you can collaborate simultaneously with other people on Excel documents, Word documents, PowerPoint documents in the cloud simultaneously. You can also do this in SharePoint and do this in SharePoint with your clients. But ultimately, the coolest part about that is the ability to be able to simultaneously do this in OneDrive and also in SharePoint, where you can collaborate with your clients, with your team members simultaneously in a secure place in the cloud. Another thing to note here, so yeah, kind of the biggest advantages of OneDrive is you can store all your files in the cloud, right? You're probably already paying for it either way if you're paying for Microsoft 365. You can share a secure folder with your clients or vendors. You can do collaboration in the cloud. So you can edit documents together, add comments, add notes. And then the multiple revisioning is also really cool in the cloud as well, where in OneDrive, you can have multiple revisionings. Super cool feature for being able to have everything in the cloud. So OneDrive, once again, like I mentioned, is a super powerful tool to do all of your file storage in the cloud. And then you might be asking, how do they authenticate themselves? Well, they need to have a Microsoft login, which is free, just like Google or any one of those other providers, that they can authenticate themselves. And once again, 80% of the Fortune 500 companies use Microsoft 365. It's like 70 to 80% of businesses use it. So chances are your clients, your partners, your team is all going to have a Microsoft 365 login that they can log into your shared folder to access the documents, download the documents, upload new documents. So it's very common and very easy to use. And setting up the security features is super great as well. So awesome. We're going to switch tracks here and move over to Microsoft Teams, which Teams is probably one of the coolest platforms to come out in the past couple of years. And it's really become a competitor to Slack. And we used Slack before Teams. I'll talk about why we switched over to Teams and why Teams is such a great platform. So what is Microsoft Teams and Slack, and what are these tools? So first, they're team collaboration platforms, pun intended. But essentially what they are is they give you the ability to have collaboration internally with your teams simultaneously and in real time. So they really came out of the need and the necessity to have synchronous collaboration with your team, but you don't want to text them, you don't want to call them, and you don't want to send an email. And it's kind of that instant messenger, right? So if you text your coworkers or your boss or your clients, that's really not the best practice because there's really no record of it. It's on your personal device, which is also not a best practice. You should really not have any of your personal information being used on all your business information, being used on a personal device. And then it's hard to have a record of it. It's hard to search it. Text messages get lost. If you're a law firm, we work with a lot of law firms. Text messages get lost. It's hard to have a record of it. So Teams gives you the ability to have basically instant message with you and your clients and your team internally and then also do a bunch of other things as well. So how we use Teams and how we help our clients use it is, internally speaking, I never call my team members or my boss. I never email them, very rarely. I never text them. I do everything in Teams. So I call them in Teams. I have meetings in Teams. I don't text them. I send them messages in Teams, and it gives you the ability to collaborate with people simultaneously in real time. It gives you the ability to have meetings in Teams where you're able to host a meeting, pull up a document, look at it together, or just call them, right? If you just want to call them and have an audio conversation, you can do that without the cameras on as well. And then you're also able to hold meetings. And I'm going to head this question on right away, is why are we not using Microsoft Teams right now for our webinar? So in our live stream. I love Teams for internal collaboration, external collaboration. So if you're meeting with a client, it works great. But what I found is Zoom, especially from a marketing and sales standpoint, so if you're trying to have the lowest barriers to entry, Zoom is more, people have Zoom everywhere. Because of the pandemic, Zoom is on everyone's phone, it's on their computer. People are using Zoom across the board. The user adoption of Zoom is, whether you're a Google user, a Microsoft user, you're an Apple or a PC user, you have Zoom, generally speaking. So it's more accessible, and Zoom just has, their webinar platform is a little more superior to Teams webinar platforms. Teams is trying to work their way up, and eventually I bet they will. But from a webinar standpoint, it is ultimately, they do have a better webinar platform. And for going live and recordings and things like that, it is just ultimately a better platform. So that's why we're using Zoom right now. With Teams, though, for internal communication, it's awesome. Like I mentioned, for any internal communication. And then for external communication, it's also great too. So if you want to meet with your clients, if you want to have a meeting with your clients, or even just a conference call, or a video conference, it's great for that too. So it's basically, Microsoft Teams can be a replacement of Zoom, your email with clients, instant messaging, and your phone system. So it can really be all of those things in one, and you don't necessarily need all those other things if you're using Teams. You can really eliminate a lot of those other uses. There's still obviously points of using email and having phone calls and things like that, but Teams can replace that and just simplify your life, and then have it be more streamlined. And especially as we go into this next slide, you'll see this is another kind of template, and I'll show you how we use Teams. But you have the ability to have different channels, and the ability to really collaborate, add files, videos, bring people into multiple conversations. One cool feature I love in Teams is I can be talking to one person on our team and then add somebody else to the conversation and get them up to speed. I can share it with them from like today, right? Or I can be like, hey, I want them to see all of our chat and collaboration of the past week. You can also record meetings in Teams and have a recorded meeting, so you can share that. We do that a lot. That way, if somebody misses a meeting, we'll have a recording of the Teams meeting. So there's a lot you can do with it. And so you may be asking, well, if I'm a Google user, should I use Slack or should I use Teams? And the great thing, like I mentioned before, is because Teams is included in the Microsoft subscriptions, it's, if you're already using Outlook, if you're an Outlook user and you use Excel and Word, you can use Teams, you can use OneDrive, and it's free. And they work, and they have a lot of abilities for crossover and being able to kind of combine them all and use them all together. So that being said, it really has a lot of features in that way. And then also Teams gives you the ability to ultimately, kind of big picture, have all your collaboration in one place, have the ability to internally collaborate with your team members, have the ability to externally communicate with your clients. You're not texting people, you're not having to call people. You can bring people in, you can record it, you can have a history of it. So you can search. That's one of the coolest things I love about Teams. You can search things, right? Like, oh, when we had that conversation a month ago, what did they say I should do in that one situation? I can go search it and have a record of it, which is probably one of my favorite features of Teams. Awesome. Kind of big picture before we move on to the next topic. If you need help with Microsoft Teams, with Microsoft in general, we are a Microsoft reseller and a provider. So we're happy to have a one-on-one conversation with your organization to see how we can potentially help you. Go to nwtex.com/Microsoft365. You can schedule a one-on-one meeting with us. I also put it in the chat for all those that are on Zoom. But nwtex.com/Microsoft365. You can schedule a one-on-one right now, and we can help you evaluate Microsoft in general. We can see if we can help you more with utilizing it. If you're trying to migrate to the cloud or trying to move over from Google, or we can help you evaluate all that. Like I mentioned, we're a full-fledged IT provider, so we have a lot of experience in all those areas. So you can book a free 30-minute session with us, nwtex.com/Microsoft365 to schedule that now. Awesome. Let's move on to kind of some of the benefits of using Teams. So here's some quick stats of some of the quantitative benefits and additional impact of Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft did some surveys and a couple things here. And these are some of the outcomes you can think about when utilizing Teams and some of the benefits for your organization. So number one is it's 4 hours are saved by information workers through improved collaboration, information sharing. Sarah, thanks for submitting that question. Yes, you can schedule it with me. It will, and through that link, you'll schedule a one-on-one with me and myself and another member of our team if they're available as well. So yeah, as far as collaboration goes here, information sharing, right? That's a big deal, especially if you're a remote company. So we're a fully remote company. We have team members across the country. We serve clients all around the world and a lot in the United States. And so how do we make sure we're collaborating, right? How do we make sure we're be able to share information in real time like you would if you're in a physical office? So a lot of time was saved through Teams being able to get that instant communication. 150 trips on average were saved for overnight trips, replaced with online meetings by year 3. So we know this from just virtual meetings, right? You don't have to travel. You have the ability to meet with people in person. Or meet with them virtually and have that collaboration, just like we do with Zoom and a lot of other virtual meetings. 45 minutes per week are saved by frontline workers collaborating with colleagues. So once again, being able to collaborate is huge, right? Being able to ping somebody and get an answer to a question. It's funny. I actually, just the other week, I was talking to a client and they asked me a question. And I love in the chat, Terry mentioned great for green businesses, right? Or going green, not being able to travel. Thanks for pointing that out. Super, super great point. Being able to save time and not having to, reduce our carbon footprint by not being able to having to travel. But as far as being able to, as far as that instant collaboration, I was talking to a client and they asked me a question and I needed to ask an engineer. While I was in the virtual meeting with them, I instant messaged one of our engineers and be like, hey, I'm on the call with a client. They're wondering this question. And within 5 minutes, one of our engineers was able to get back to me. And so while I was in the virtual meeting with the client, I was able to get that answer, right? Super cool. Just having that quick communication and being able to get those answers to our client while I was on the phone with them, right? I didn't need to hang up with them and be like, oh, let me go call Kevin and get the answer or send him an email, right? I was able to get that quick answer from them while I was in the meeting with our client. Huge value add. The client was super happy because I was able to get that answer for them. Another point here, 17% improvement on time decisions made by decision makers. So this is something that's so cool. And I think with team collaboration, so we've been hiring people remotely and not only can we hire people so much quicker because we are remote, right? We can have virtual meetings. We literally hired somebody within almost 48 hours because we were able to have multiple meetings with people virtually with our team members. We were able to throw up a recording to the team and be like, hey, here's somebody we interviewed. What does everyone think? They're able to watch the recording of the interview and provide feedback. And some of our most recent hires We hired them within 24 to 48 hours of our first interview because we were able to have multiple interviews very quickly, right? Virtually over Teams. We're able to have a recording of those meetings, which we then shared in our channels and had multiple people watch it quickly and provide feedback on it. And we're able to hire that person and get that person onboarded quickly. Before, it would have taken weeks, right, to hire somebody. And instead, we're able to hire this person so much quicker. So super cool value add and saving times for our decision makers. Awesome. 88% of surveyed response felt having their solutions in one place saves time. So like I mentioned, as a personal user and as our clients have benefited from Teams, definitely agree with this. Almost 19% reduction in meetings each week. This is huge. Teams saves meetings. Not being able to have to call somebody or set up a meeting. Team meetings are great, right? And having that kind of slow dialogue, brainstorming sessions are super important. Meetings are great. But if you're setting up a meeting for just small questions, then it can be a huge waste of time. So almost 20% of reduction in meetings each week using Teams because of that collaboration. Super cool. Awesome. We have a couple more slides here. Then I want to get to your questions. We're also going to do a quick demo of Teams as well. Here's a couple of the things I mentioned here earlier around Teams. First, the searching of the messages. So you can search messages, you can search files that were shared in Teams to find things quickly and pull those up. You can also have tags in Teams. So you can tag somebody, right? Like if you're in a general channel that everyone's on, you can tag people and be like, hey, Kevin, I need, were you working on this or should this be somebody else's? Or if you have a team, right, where it's a specific team that you want to tag everyone in that team so they're all notified, you can do that as well. One question we get a lot is, how can you create channels and ensure that not everyone is shared on everything, right? Because if you have multiple teams, then you don't want to overload people with information. So you can create specific channels in Teams. Once again, Microsoft, I love them, but they do not make things simple. They literally have teams within Teams. So you have Teams as a software, but then you also have teams, which are groups of people that, let's say you have your support team or your sales team. And within that, you can have channels based upon the needs of everyone and give people specific permissions to specific channels. That way, accounting doesn't need to know what operations is doing, and marketing doesn't necessarily need to know what marketing's doing. Marketing doesn't need to know what operations is doing, right? And so ultimately, you want to create those teams and those channels to kind of create some separation in there. Another thing here as well is chat. So this is kind of the chat feature where you're able to see recent chat. So people that have sent you messages will come to the very top and also, have the most frequent conversations just in your chat area. File storage. So they're getting better at this, where you can have your SharePoint or your OneDrive files in Teams, and you can pull those up, throw them in a meeting, throw those in a channel and be like, hey, everyone needs to work on this and communicate, kind of have all your files in there as well. Teams, and they're constantly adding more documents where you can add more and more, not documents, applications where, whether it's you want to have, with some examples on here, YouTube or your Hootsuite, which is a social media, or Power BI or PDF or Stream, you can add different tabs for different applications. So depending on, maybe you have a project management tool you're using, you can integrate that. And they're constantly evolving. And over the past year, Teams is just, they've added a ton of features and they're constantly adding more each day. Awesome. So a couple notes here before we switch over to Q&A and also Teams. Once again, the future of Microsoft is overall, they're switching to Microsoft 365. They're going to be including all the Office 365. They're going to have some device management. It's going to come with the Windows 10 upgrade. They're going to add a bunch of security features. They're focused a ton on security, which is super important, especially as we've seen so many breaches recently as well. So like I mentioned, if you need additional help, please reach out to us. You can schedule a one-on-one conversation with us at nwtext.com/Microsoft 365. Schedule a free 30-minute conversation with us. So kind of the benefits of Microsoft 365. Once again, you get all the applications like Word, Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook. If you're a subscriber already, you know you already have these. You also get the email, OneDrive, Teams, and more. And there's also some, if you're using Exchange, there's some benefits of Exchange as well. And then there's a bunch of features. So whether it's the E3 license or E4, E5 or different licenses, you're going to get all these things. You're probably already paying for it. So if you're not utilizing Teams or OneDrive for your file storage or just utilizing all of them together, please reach out to us and we can help you more with doing that. Some of the additional security features, some pretty cool stuff that they're adding is going to be safe links. So you know with that links are safe when you click on them because of all the phishing scams that are out there. Safe attachments, right? It will scan the documents. They have some of that already in place with OneDrive. And then spoof intelligence. Spoofing is when you get an email that appears to be from somebody legitimate, but they're actually just impersonating you or somebody else. And so it has some spoof intelligence on there. A lot of these things can be solved with best practices with cybersecurity, which we help our clients with a lot. Spoofing is also something that can be solved with DMARC. So a lot of our clients have spoofing issues. We've been able to help them solve or exponentially reduce with DMARC permissions in your DNS and things like that. But Microsoft is trying to bolster and help as well with those things and add on additional features. So lots of cool stuff coming down the pipeline. Awesome. I'm going to switch over my screen here and give you a brief overview of how we use Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Teams, like I mentioned, I can't show you everything because we do have some client confidential information here. I'm going to give you the overview of how we use Teams and some of the features of utilizing it. And once again, depending on your organization and how you utilize Teams, there can be pros and cons. You can use Teams on your desktop. You can also use it on your mobile device. I love the mobile device feature. It pretty much, you can do everything on the mobile device. And, you know, if you're in a meeting on your computer, you can switch over to your phone and just utilize it there. So super cool as well. So I'm pulling up Teams here. And I'm going to switch my screen here so you can see our Teams. But ultimately, yeah, there's the biggest reason, and I'm going to show you here is, let me pull up here. And cool. Awesome. So as you can see, my Teams screen here, here's a couple different ways we use it. So first, this is the lounge. And the lounge is what we used to be called, it was basically where we just talk about what's going on in our lives, right? So just as sharing a cocktail, and, you know, we have different things. One of our team members is doing a remodel, adding an addition on this house. I showed some pictures of me and my wife over the 4th of July weekend. One of our team members got a fish. So it's a way for all of us to kind of collaborate and just have kind of non-work related topics. We also, I can't go into all of these, but we have different channels here. You know, obviously we're IT guys, so we talk about different technology, like technology we're sharing, where we post articles and recent information around technology. We have different channels based upon, you know, support. So our support services, so our engineers and technicians that are servicing our clients, that's kind of the front line. We even have fun things like film fans and stuff like that on sites and phone deploys and billing. Our general is kind of just for all of our entire organization, right? What's something that everyone should know about? And then there's also some hidden channels as well, just based upon people's needs and who's in the organization. So SMS is kind of a cool feature where, let's say we have a shared MFA where we're all trying to access one account. Well, we have the MFA code go to our Teams channel. That way we can all get the code to get it into Amazon or whatever it is. Also, some other things here is our calendar. So my Outlook calendar is right in Teams. It's a great feature. I can schedule things right within Teams. I can schedule a meeting in Teams. I can see my whole calendar. I can also see my chats. So these are all the chats from internal communication and also our groups. So if there's a group of people on a chat, activity will just give a summary of everything that's going on in all of the channels. Teams also has a call feature where you can integrate a phone system. We've had pros and cons of this. It's not quite there yet where we think it's a business class phone system, but it also it works well as but we have a third party VoIP solution that we use for our clients. So if you have a phone system need, we can help you that as well. This works so. It's really not a business class phone system where you can have a robust auto attendant and call queues and after hours and multi-call features. So, but this is kind of the overview. And once again, it can do a lot, and also the files, right? It has all my files from SharePoint and OneDrive in here that I can collaborate and utilize with our team. So awesome. I'm going to switch back screens here because I want to get that. We have a lot of great questions coming in the Q&A, and I want to make sure we get to all of them. So some of the questions I want to make sure we get to here are, well, first, before we get into the questions, I'm going to jump right into the questions here. First question is, will this include integrations of Power BI dashboards with Microsoft Teams? Great question. I know some of our clients have used Power BI, and we've used it as well. The integrations with Teams, I don't personally have not used them, but Dan, feel free to reach out to us and we can connect you with somebody that can show you how to use that or potentially use that. Is there a reason you all chose to host on Zoom and not Teams? Tanya, great question. I hope I answered that earlier. Ultimately, Teams is great. Their webinar feature isn't as robust as Zoom. That being said, for meetings with clients and or team members, it's great as well. And kind of having that one-to-one meeting or the group meetings is also robust as well. Tanya, how does this directly compare to Google Workspaces, pros and cons and gaps on each side? So ultimately, like I mentioned earlier, Microsoft 365 security and compliance is just more secure and more compliant. It has the ability to have more of that in place. So if you're a highly regulated industry, we recommend our clients use Microsoft 365. And then if you are working with organizations, so if you're a marketing agency that's working with Fortune 500 companies, or you have to complete some sort of security audit or compliance or questionnaire, you're going to pass the audit more robustly with Microsoft 365. Carl, can we get copies of the slides? Yes, we're going to send out a copy of the recording. Just reach out to us, Carl, and we can get you a copy of the slides as well. Kathleen, what are the differences between Microsoft 365 and Exchange for email? So Exchange is where you host the email on your local server or in the cloud. Exchange is an older technology for hosting email. We used to use an Exchange server. They're super complex. They're super challenging to maintain. And honestly, if you can move away from Exchange, huge plus. They're very costly to maintain. You have to have a server or some sort of complex virtual server to maintain them. And if you can move to Microsoft 365, Outlook, and their solution, a huge benefit. We can help you do that. If you are using an Exchange server, it's probably been very problematic. Your email has probably gone out, which, before the cloud, you had to use an Exchange server to be able to use email. And so once again, ultimately, you had to use it. So you can move away from Exchange server, huge perk, and we highly recommend it because they're extremely difficult to maintain. They're very complex, and there's really no need to have them anymore. 10 years ago, you had to have one. So don't beat yourself up for having one, because 10 years ago, the cloud wasn't as robust as it is now. It wasn't as cost effective. It wasn't as stable. Wasn't as secure. Excuse me. Yes, you can get a copy of this recording, and feel free to share it with your team as well, Rachel. Jody, what about Box.com? We've used this as a cloud storage for years. How does it compare? Box, Dropbox, Citrix ShareFile, they're all great file storage solutions. They all have their pros and cons. The one negative is that you have to pay for them. right? Whereas OneDrive is free with a Microsoft 365 subscription. Box and those other solutions, they have pros and cons. I would say Box is the main negative is that they don't have their own native document type, right? So Microsoft 365, Excel documents, Word documents work really well in OneDrive and SharePoint because they're a native platform. Similar to Google Sheets and documents and presentation works really well in Google. They don't work really well in Microsoft. So same thing with Dropbox is that there's always going to be a couple glitches and there's always going to be some features you're not going to get. If you're using Excel documents, you're using Word documents, they work better in the native platform, which is OneDrive and SharePoint. That being said, Dropbox and Dropbox.com, they all use the same name, I swear. They just change up their words. And Citrix ShareFile are all very similar. And then ultimately, they are, they're all very similar. They can do a lot of the same features of having a secure login and secure file sharing. But if you're already using Microsoft 365, then it's great. We have a lot of clients that use Citrix ShareFile, and we've moved clients to Citrix ShareFile that have more complex files sharing needs. That being said, OneDrive and SharePoint work great as well. Stephanie, how do you share documents with people outside of your agency with SharePoint and OneDrive? I hope I covered this earlier. You create a shared folder. You basically create a folder that you share with people through multiple ways. You can send a link. You can have the authenticator, which I mentioned earlier is the most secure way to do that. Would you recommend the best tutorials for figuring out how to effectively load, share your files into Microsoft 365? I find their communication to be so dense. Completely agree. Margaret, it's honestly, I would reach out to your IT department or somebody like us to help you migrate your files to OneDrive or SharePoint. It can be tricky, and you want to make sure you do it the right way. That way you don't lose anything and things move over effectively. Tanya, from calls within Teams, could you reach on the team, have a distinct phone number that is reachable outside the organization? Yes, you can do that. Like a VoIP phone system, but like I mentioned, it's not quite up to snuff with other VoIP providers. Let's see here. If you have a meeting with an external party, can you send the meeting recording to them from Teams? Yes, you can. You can. It shares it in Microsoft Stream, and you can share that link with people outside the organization. Great question. Tanya, do companies, should they have one solution for email and video conferencing? Is it okay for some people to be on Gmail and others on Outlook? Should you use Zoom and also Teams? We recommend simplifying as much as possible. So we use Microsoft Teams and Zoom. Those are the two platforms we use. And Teams for pretty 90% of what we do, and Zoom for 10% of what we do. So we try to simplify as much as possible for compliance, security, recordings, and all that fun stuff. Anonymous asks, in offender compliance, all clients' emails must go through an on-premise secure server. Is there a way to route team chats through email as a sent file when I post? That is a great question, and I have no idea. Please reach out to us, and we can get an engineer to look at that question for you. Can you share the link again? I didn't grab it. Sabrina, I'll put the link back in the chat as well. And feel free to schedule with us on our website there, and also reach out to us by email if you have more questions. I wish, oh, sorry, I didn't feel like I was, I'll move on to the question here. Tanya, is there a list of tools that integrate with Teams? Are you saying it integrates with everything like Asana? So yes, it does integrate with a ton of project management tools that you can use as well. Awesome. How do you put your clients' communications in Teams as well? I see your internal Teams, but nothing with clients. So you can create channels for your clients. So if your clients are using Teams, they can also use folders within and have communication with your clients there as well. Rebecca asks, we are a law firm. We need to separate meetings, messages, etc. by cases. Is there a way to do that in Teams? Yes, you can create specific channels for meetings as well. Awesome. And then Microsoft provide digital document signing in the future. DocuSign, Sign Request. We currently use Sign Quest, and Box recently purchased them. We do not want to get a Box subscription. So I'm unsure about that. Please reach out to us and we can have an engineer look at that as well for you. And as far as documents go, I know there's some integrations with OneDrive and whatnot. I'm not entirely sure the extent, depending on what you need and whatnot for, I know specific industries like CPAs have to have a certain type of file storage and whatnot. So great questions. I don't think we got to all of them. I'm so sorry. If you have more additional questions, please reach out to us. nwtex.com/Microsoft365 to schedule. You can also reach us at hello@nwtex. And for all those that are watching this over Zoom, you will receive a recording and a follow-up that you can ask us questions there as well. Thanks everyone for joining us. I hope this was super informational and helpful. If you have additional questions, please reach out to us and we can get those answered for you. And we can see if we can help you utilize Microsoft 365 more. So thanks again, everyone, for spending time with us today. I hope this was helpful. Everyone take care and be well.